be the same price, I'd go for the fair trade. But if they were $1 more, probably I'd still buy the cheap ones.
What about you, Chris?
Well, of course, I ran a development agency for 10 years, and trade is a huge part of how do you lift communities out of poverty. So kind of duty-bound to buy the fair traded coffee and the bananas. But I think there's a bigger story, and actually a better story than it appears. So the story at one side is that, fair trade is struggling to get mileage. But actually, if we think about it, the whole fair trade model was focused on cocoa, on coffee, on tea and bananas. If you follow that logic through, you'd always go and buy your clothes at a trade aid shop. The reality is 99% of us don't. We buy it from Kmart, if you've got some money from Barker's, if you've got more money from H&M and so on. So actually what you want to do is you want to get those firms where most people are actually buying their clothes to actually shop there. And what's exciting is that these firms are starting to turn around now and say, perhaps not for good moral reasons, but for good sales reasons, that actually we need to respond to our consumers. And here's the thing, there's a great success story in New Zealand about fair trade, and it's to do with clothing. So New Zealand is unusual than even compared to Australia. We actually still have manufacturers of clothes in New Zealand. And Tier Fund, a very well-known development agency here, 3 years ago,
they do the clothing report.
The ethical clothing report. Now, when that first came out, people were horrified, those who scored low. But what's happened since is that a number of those firms have actually grouped together and said, we're too small to influence the supply chain by ourselves, but collectively we can. So they've set up a group called Mindful Fashion. It's got people like Kate Sylvester and others involved in that, who are actually looking at how do they source their documents and how do they get scale to actually make a difference.
But that goes to another point. So, in terms of... do you think that because one trend is some people, some companies, Sainsbury's in the UK and some here too, have decided to go, you know what, we'll create our own in-house certification. So, for example, you've got Mondelez, who have Cadbury. They've got their own in-house scheme, Cocoa Life. Starbucks, Cafe Practices. McDonald's, McCafe Sustainability Improvement Program. Isn't it like marking your own homework?
There's that risk, and there's always a place
What's the point of that?
Well, you could argue that actually what's happening is actually they're really taking it on board, and rather than seeing it as a compliance thing, a tick box thing, actually it really is influencing how they produce their coffee or their cocoa or their clothes or sell their hamburgers. So you could say actually that's a maturation of fair trade. There is risks because you're right, we're marking our own homework.
What about you, Susan? I mean, you Chris talks about clothes and you love your fashion. What angle of fashion sort of directs your purchases?
It's very, very clear, and it's definitely not based on fair trade. I'm pleased to say that my favourite brands are New Zealand brands, MBZ and World, but it's entirely based around the quality of the product, I'm afraid. But I do think there's a lack of education, and this feeds into some of what Chris is saying about what fair trade actually is. And when other producers start setting up their own brand, it dilutes that. So perhaps there's an opportunity for further education, just as we had education about plastic bags to get people to sign up to that.
Do you think that we have some sort of label fatigue, that it's creating a lot of confusion for the shopper, Susan? There are so many logos these days.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's what I'm saying. I don't really understand what fair trade is and the significance of it. So education.
All right, very good. What a wonderful and fascinating panel you've both been. Susan Hornsby-Gallick and Chris Clark, thank you very much.
Thanks, Wallace.
For joining me both. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow, 3:45 sharp of Friday. Checkpoint is next. See you then.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi a Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. On tonight's programme, more and more people are turning up at Ihumātao in Auckland to join protesters or protectors as some Auckland councillors say they regret signing off on the housing development. We'll also have the Prime Minister's view later in the programme. What's the latest in Canada, where two suspected killers on the run have found their way to a remote town? We'll talk to the Deputy Mayor. Why do some principals have to stump up teacher bonuses after the recently agreed pay deal? And the All Black coaches found a way to play Bowden Barrett and Richie Mo'unga together as they prepare to face the Springboks in Wellington this weekend. We'll have the latest as Steve Hansen makes as many changes to his lineup as Boris Johnson has. We'll also get the latest from Westminster as well.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Ihumātao with DNA. Some Auckland councillors say they regret signing off on the Ihumātao land being used for housing. The standoff between hundreds of protesters and the police next to a historical reserve in Mangere was discussed as an extraordinary item at a council meeting this afternoon. They voted unanimously to organising an urgent meeting between interested parties as a last-ditch effort to resolve the dispute. In 2014, the government and the council allocated a piece of land next to the Ihumātao Stonefields Historic Reserve as a special housing area. Councillor Wayne Walker now says that was wrong.
The special housing legislation that went to this was a mistake, and arguably the council should have been stronger in opposing it.
Auckland councillor Wayne Walker. The Prime Minister says while everyone wants to see the resolution of the bitter dispute at Ihumātao, the government won't get involved. Jacinda Ardern says a resolution has to come from mana whenua. Ms Ardern refused to comment on how long police would stay at Ihumātao, saying that is an operational matter. The mother of Ihumātao Mausi hopes her daughter's legacy will be better healthcare throughout the Southern District. The 2-year-old died in 2013 after twice being sent home from Dunedin Hospital's emergency department in the 3 days before she died. Timothy Brown reports.
Ihumātao Mausi stopped breathing about 1 o'clock on the afternoon of September the 29th, 2013. The night before, she was discharged from Dunedin Hospital less than an hour after arriving and following the assessment of a junior doctor. What no one knew is the child had undiagnosed acute myeloid leukemia. The Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer, Nigel Mueller, has apologised and says the culture and policies of the DHB have changed in the wake of the child's death. Her mother, Tracy Alvins, says she hopes her daughter's death means no other family will have to go through what she has. In Dunedin, Timothy Brown.
A 37-year-old woman has been arrested over allegations of sexual misconduct at Marlborough Boys College. The college confirmed in May that a teacher was on leave while the authorities investigated what they called a sensitive matter that might have involved a student. The school declined to give details of what happened, but it was reportedly linked to allegations that a teacher had sexual relationships with students over several years. The police today confirmed they've made an arrest as part of an ongoing investigation. The woman has been charged with sexual connection with a young person under 16 and intentionally exposing a young person to indecent material. She will appear in the Blenheim District Court on July the 29th. The Minister of Treaty of Waitangi Negotiations, Andrew Little, says an iwi that has battled 28 years to get a fair treaty settlement has suffered significantly. The final reading for the Ngāti Rangi Treaty settlement is underway at Parliament. It will finalise a $17 million settlement for the iwi, which will also see an entity set up to protect the Whangaehu River. Andrew Little says Ngāti Rangi made many attempts to protect their land since the signing of the treaty, but the Crown did not allow them to take control.
The Crown's treaty breaches have caused Ngāti Rangi to endure significant socio-economic disparity. Their language, culture, economy, health and connection to the Tōranga Waiwai have all suffered from the Crown's colonial regime.
The Minister of Treaty of Waitangi Negotiations, Andrew Little, speaking in Parliament this afternoon. A lawyer in the trial of 3 people over the death of a Ngārua Wahia man 1 year ago has asked the jury not to be swayed by prejudice over gangs and drug dealers. Mitchell Patterson died after being held in a chokehold in the back of a car in Hamilton, and his body was later found at McLaren Falls in Bay of Plenty. A former gang leader, Leon Wilson, and Christopher Smith are charged with kidnapping, manslaughter and conspiring to defeat the course of justice. Chloe Kerridge faces kidnapping and conspiring to defeat justice charges. Leon Wilson's lawyer, Rutger Hauer, warned the jury to put aside any views they have on the lifestyle of his client.
We call it prejudice. We don't mean it in perhaps the more negative way, you understand it, but it's instinctive prejudice. And I'll say to you on behalf of Mr. Wilson, my opinion is the biggest obstacle that he has today to justice is prejudice.
Rutger Hauer. The judge will sum up tomorrow morning before the jury retires to reach a verdict. The embattled governor of the US territory of Puerto Rico has resigned following weeks of sometimes violent protest. Ricardo Roseo has been resisting calls to step down over a scandal involving leaked chat messages and government corruption. It's 5:05. The World Cup winning Silver Ferns will each get $25,000 for their win, but there's nothing for coach Nolene Taurua at this stage. No prize money came with the world title when New Zealand beat arch rivals Australia by 1 goal in Liverpool on Monday. But Sky Television and team sponsors ANZ, Puma and MYOB have all contributed to the players' payments. Taurua, who's been in the job only 11 months, has been credited with turning the side around following their disastrous Commonwealth Games campaign last year when they failed to win a medal. Netball New Zealand's Chief Executive Jenny Wiley says they hope to pay bonuses to the coaches and team management too.
We are absolutely looking to do something for the coaches and management. It's just a matter of working through that next step of what it might look like for them as well. So they will be recognised too.
Jenny Wiley. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says they've been pondering starting Beauden Barrett at fullback and Richie Mo'unga at first 5 ever since Damien McKenzie's World Cup dream was dashed. Mo'unga will start in the number 10 jersey against the Springboks in Wellington this weekend, with Barrett in the back 3 alongside Ben Smith and Reiko Ioane. McKenzie was used in the dual playmaker role until he suffered a season-ending injury playing for the Chiefs in April. Hansen says they're keen to see how the Mo'unga-Barrett combination works.
We've got a plan with a whole lot of things that we want to do before we get to the nitty-gritty business, and we just felt Saturday's game's the right time to try that particular part of the plan.
The test is a sellout with 35,600 tickets sold. That's the news.
The Ihumātao land protest grows.
All sorts of people milling about with the common goal to protecting this part of our history and our heritage.
The Environment Minister takes on the RMA.
Water quality's got worse, climate change emissions have gone up, so it really hasn't worked as it was intended to protect the environment.
And big changes as the All Blacks take on the Springboks.
Hansen has said he wanted to have his most senior players in the back 3, Reiko Ioane, Ben Smith and Beauden Barrett.
Tackling all the major issues. Morning Report from 6 a.m. weekdays with Corin Dan and Susie Ferguson on air, on Facebook and on rnz.co.nz.
Then on 9 to noon, the winter cough nightmare. What type of cough do you have and what can you do about it? And after 10, literary crime writer James Elroy, LA Confidential and more. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, mainly fine. Rain in the far north tonight and tomorrow. Possible thunderstorms with a few showers elsewhere tomorrow. For Auckland, Waikato and Gisborne, a few showers. Coromandel Peninsula and Western Bay of Plenty, periods of rain with some heavy falls. Waitomo to Manawatu, including the remainder of the Bay of Plenty, Central High Country, also Hawke's Bay and Wairatapa. Mainly fine weather, isolated afternoon showers tomorrow. Horo Whenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, fine weather. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Canterbury and Otago. Mainly fine, areas of low cloud or fog in the mornings, persisting about some valleys. For Westland, mainly fine, becoming cloudy tomorrow evening. Southland, fine apart from high cloud. Fiordland, cloudy periods, rain developing in the west this evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, the odd shower tonight. You're with RNZ National. It's 5:08.
Thanks very much, Susanna. And I'm Alex Perrottet with you for the next hour and a half. The crowds, we're going to Ihumātao, of course. The crowds are growing and they're continuing to grow at a protest in South Auckland where hundreds of people are opposing a major housing development on Māori ancestral land. Supporters have arrived from across the country to be at Ihumātao. There are now more than 200 people on the site with no signs of the occupation letting up. There have been no further arrests since yesterday morning, but Amnesty International observers are still on site to monitor any human rights breaches. Mariana Johnson has more.
Tino Rangatiratanga flags began appearing through the mist as people made the journey up the road to join the police blockades this morning. By 10 a.m, a large crowd was getting warmed up with a bit of Tai Chi. The numbers of protesters remained consistent today, around 200, but protest leader Pania Newton says more groups are expected in the coming days.
We've received word that whānau from all Pōtiki are arriving. We know that a bus from Wellington, Pōneke, left late last night, and yesterday some of our whanaunga from the Hokianga came down and said that they will be mobilising their whānau in the far north, and we can expect a couple of buses in the coming days.
These people made the long journey from the east coast to stop the development.
Yeah, I'm from the east coast in Kaiawa. and I'm here because it's the right thing to do. This is Māori land, it's always been Māori land, and it always will be. Yes.
But there are plenty of locals getting stuck in as well, sorting out kai, water and piles of firewood that keep arriving. Many know this place and its important history.
In this community, we learnt a lot about the history around here, and what's sacred about it is that it was Māori land in the first place. So yeah, I guess just gaining that back would be great.
Arriving mid-morning, rangatira Joe Hawke, who led the 506-day occupation at Bastion Point in the mid-70s, was treated as the guest of honour. He took up a front seat accompanied by whānau from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei.
The message from our uncle and from us here at Ōrākei, specifically uncle, is that this is no different to what we went through and what we endured at Takaparafa. He sees this as exactly the same. And the message is to stand strong, to endure, to carry on, and to get our land back.
Despite grumblings about the rude awakening from police in the early hours of the morning, the protest has today remained peaceful. However, Pania Newton is concerned about the safety of protesters as police numbers increase. 3 representatives and a volunteer from Amnesty International arrived this morning to investigate any breaches of human rights and serve as a third-party mediator.
Amnesty International has been here for a few hours, and it's clear to us that both protesters and police are keen to keep this as a peaceful gathering. There have been reports that there was a minor scuffle this morning, and so we need to talk to some more people to verify what occurred there.
We're now into the 3rd day since occupiers at Ihumātao were evicted by police, local kaumātua and Fletcher Building. People continue to arrive from around the country to tautoko or support those protesters who are trying to prevent 480 houses being built on this whenua right here. They continue to hold a line in front of police, as you can see behind me, to prevent that construction from happening. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
And some Auckland councillors say they regret signing off on the Ihumātao land being used for housing. Councillors discussed the ongoing standoff between protesters and the police next to a historical reserve in Mangere as an extraordinary item at a meeting this afternoon. They voted unanimously in favour of organising an urgent meeting between interested parties as a last-ditch effort to resolve the dispute. But supporters say they'll remain sceptical until they see what's on the table. Katie Scotcher reports.
Ihumātao's history is long and complicated, and Auckland's governing body is interwoven with its most recent chapters. It started when Auckland Council tried to make the land an open public space. In 2012, this move was successfully challenged in the Environment Court, and the council was directed to rezone the land, meaning it could be developed for business or residential purposes in future. The council couldn't challenge this decision. 2 years later, the government and the council allocated a piece of land next to the Otuatoa Stonefields Historic Reserve as a special housing area. Councillor Wayne Walker now says that piece of legislation was a mistake.
The special housing legislation that went to this was a mistake, and arguably the council should have been stronger in opposing it.
In 2015, the council voted against a motion to revoke the special housing area, 12-5. Pania Newton and others opposing the development were there 4 years ago as councillors cast their votes and presented a petition saying the rural land needed to be protected due to its cultural and environmental significance. Councillor John Watson remembers that day well.
They came in here in record numbers back in 2015, absolutely packed this place out. Biggest crowd you've ever seen in here. In the chamber, outside, downstairs. It should have been apparent at that point that this matters to the people out there and that it's not going to go away.
In March this year, Seoul and its supporters took a petition to Parliament demanding government intervention to prevent a confrontation on the land. The following month, the hikoi ending in Auckland's Aotea Square saw a 20,000 signature petition delivered to Auckland Mayor Phil Goff, calling for local council and government to protect the land. John Watson says the council was optimistic in thinking the dispute would just disappear.
What became very apparent to me as an outsider is attitudes were hardening and what's happened over the last few days has just racked it all up again now.
Protesters have now been in a standoff with the police at Ihumātao for 3 days. Councillor Efeso Collins has visited the blockade and says the police response is completely over the top.
It feels like our overstretched police force are being used as almost a private security firm for a group of foreign investors. This does not have a place in my ward.
Auckland Mayor Phil Goff said yesterday there's nothing more the council can do, but Councillor Kathy Casey today asked him to facilitate a meeting between iwi, the council, the Crown and other interested parties at Ihumātao.
I think that is all we can do, but we have to do something. So to say, well, we tried before and so said no, I think we need to say the situation is grave and it's on our watch.
Councillors voted unanimously in favour of the meeting. Mr Goff touched on the fact that he's tried to solve this dispute before, but he's willing to make a further effort to find a way around it.
You can never try hard enough to avoid confrontation that will leave scars and to try to find common ground. And I'm willing to make that further effort to approach yet again and say, is there a way around this?
A small number of supporters sat through the proceedings at the Auckland Town Hall this afternoon. After the meeting, Jacqueline Poole said how it all works needs to be carefully considered.
I'm still very sceptical around what that looks like and whether there'll be any, outcomes focused out of that. At the same time, it will be interesting to see how they get all these people in the room.
Phil Goff says it is now a matter of contacting any interested parties to determine if and when a meeting could take place. I tamaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Shurahau.
It's 17 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. We're keen for your feedback, of course. Get in touch on the text 2101's the number. You can tweet us at CheckpointRNZ. We're also on email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. If you follow us on Facebook as well, feel free to leave a comment on our live feed there. To the UK now, as his first act as Britain's new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson has taken a big broom to the top level of government. 17 of Theresa May's senior ministers have been axed or have quit of their own accord, and key roles have been given to leading Brexiteers. On his way into Downing Street, Mr Johnson said he will deliver Brexit do or die on October the 31st. CNN's Anna Stewart filed this report on what has been a defining day in British politics.
We're going to fulfil the repeated promises of Parliament to the people and come out of the EU on October the 31st. No ifs or buts.
Fighting words from the new Prime Minister, who laid out his vision for the UK with the usual oratorical flourish.
The doubters, the doomsters, the gloomsters, they are going to get it wrong again. The people who bet against Britain are going to lose their shirts.
These were Boris Johnson's first remarks as Prime Minister. Indeed, his first appearance today. He was notably absent from Parliament, perhaps not to overshadow his predecessor's last Prime Minister's questions. Theresa May didn't hold back from one last sparring match with the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
As a party leader who has accepted when her time was up, perhaps the time is now for him to do the same.
After this biting remark, May delivered her final farewell to Downing Street, wishing Boris Johnson good fortune and thanking the country.
To serve as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is the greatest honour.
Failing to deliver Brexit will ultimately be Theresa May's legacy, one that saw her heading to Buckingham Palace to tender her resignation far sooner than she might have wanted. A change of the guard on Downing Street isn't just an historic moment, it's an emotional rollercoaster. There's empathy for the outgoing Prime Minister, particularly one who failed to deliver what she set out to do and faced so much division. There's then an eerie sense of calm, perhaps a calm before the storm, as everyone awaits the new Prime Minister. And of course, a huge weight of expectation. What will he say? What will he do? And ultimately, what will his legacy be? No doubt the Queen had some words of advice for Mr Johnson when she asked him to form a government. After all, it's her 14th Prime Minister. And while Boris Johnson entered Downing Street alone, unlike his predecessors who walked in with partners and children, His girlfriend, Carrie Simmons, stood to the side in support.
We in this government will work flat out to give this country the leadership it deserves. And that work begins now.
And he was quick to appoint a new crack team. Sajid Javid takes the top role of Finance Minister. He bid for the leadership role against Boris Johnson, as did Dominic Raab, staunch Brexiteer and new Foreign Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. Completing the top team is another Brexiteer, Priti Patel, for Home Secretary. All change at the top, but potentially no change when it comes to division in Parliament and the EU's stance that it will not reopen the withdrawal agreement. Yet this Johnson-led government believes it can succeed where Theresa May's failed.
Anna Stewart there from Westminster, right on 21 minutes past 5. The inquest into the death of a 2-year-old girl from leukemia after she was discharged from Dunedin Hospital's emergency department twice in her last 3 days alive wrapped up today. It ended with evidence from the Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer. Ihumātao died in September 2013, just hours after being sent home. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown spoke to her mother, Tracy Elvins, following the inquest.
She had so much energy and love, and she was real clever, and I suppose all parents say that about their children, but Hana was amazing. Yeah, I miss her every minute of every day.
That's Tracy Elvins describing the light of her life, her only child, Hinehana Malsi'i. Hinehana died in Miss Elvins' home on September the 29th, 2013, less than 2 months shy of her 3rd birthday. The bubbly, precocious child had not been herself that week, and when she woke up screaming after midnight on Friday, September the 27th, Ms. Elvins took her daughter to the emergency department. The little girl's temperature got as high as 39.3 degrees, but after she cooled down and was given paracetamol and ibuprofen, Ms. Elvins says she was sent home around 3:30 a.m, with an expectation that the paediatric department would call them to follow up.
That was a referral that didn't happen, and that was from that night. So I mention that because they say the time, it could have saved her. It was the time that they could have picked it up that could have saved her. Well, that's another 24 some hours. So.
Hinehana refused food over the next 2 days and was lethargic. But when her breathing became laboured and wheezy on Saturday night, her mum took her back to the hospital.
I rushed her back. I thought, she needs to be in ED. There's something wrong, and it felt like we were brushed off. They're doctors, so they know what they're talking about. I'm at the emergency department medicine place. Where else could I be that's any better than that? I'm at the hospital. Anything you need that's going to save you is here.
But Hinehana was assessed by a junior doctor. Their superior did not personally assess the child, and she was sent home with her parents only an hour after arriving. By the next morning, her temperature had risen to over 40 degrees, but Tracy Elvins still believed the doctor's assurances that her daughter would be fine. Within hours, she stopped breathing, and despite being rushed to ED by an ambulance, she died. Miss Elvins says she now faces the guilt of not fighting those doctors, of not knowing what she couldn't possibly have known, that her daughter had undiagnosed acute myeloid leukemia.
On the day when she wasn't feeling very well and she said that I need to go to hospital, I said, no, you're not, Bubba, you're all right, you're going to be all right. And, you got to live with that. I told her she was going to be all right, but she wasn't, so.
Miss Elvins says she still holds anger towards those doctors who have interim name suppression, but most of all, she just feels sadness.
Every time I think about Hinehana, and how amazing she is and stuff, this other side is always there of, well, she should still be here, or she could still be here. And I believe she would still be here had they have done what they should have done. Yeah.
Ms. Elvins says the coronial inquest has been a healing experience, though she wishes the doctors responsible for Hinehana's discharge on September the 28th were there to give evidence. Coroner Bridget Winley has reserved her findings, and they are expected in the next few months. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
It's 24 and a half minutes past 5. There were crazy scenes of traffic chaos on Auckland's southern motorway this morning as all the southbound lanes were closed for 2 hours. This was after a crash involving a man fleeing police. The head-on collision happened just after 10 o'clock this morning when a man driving a stolen car on the wrong side of the southern motorway crashed into an innocent motorist near the Highbrook Drive off-ramp. The police Eagle helicopter had been monitoring the stolen car as it was driven erratically through the suburbs of South Auckland. The police declined to be interviewed tonight, but witness Mark Van Boxel can join us on the phone now. Are you there, Mark?
Yeah, g'day mate, how are you?
You're not bad. You must be still a bit shaken up after witnessing that.
It was pretty horrific, to be honest. One thing that's really stayed with me personally is that, seeing a lady in a car next to me screaming at the top of her head, no, I could see it in her voice, and
wow.
And then the accident happened, and the look of horror that came across her face. There was a passenger in the car. She was pointing out to the car, and then I saw the whole thing unfold before me, and the stupidity of someone doing that. You just can't fathom it. He knew he was coming down. He knew he was going the wrong way. He would have been doing 100k. Another car coming the other way doing 100k, and both the cars just literally disintegrated when they hit each other.
Yes, well, I mean, those of us who are watching and people who are viewing Checkpoint online or on Facebook, on our website, can just see this footage. You can go back if you're listening and watch it later if you haven't seen it already. This car comes down the off-ramp in the middle lane of the freeway, of the motorway, and head-on hits a white car. And it looks like only at the very last minute does that car try to swerve out of the way. I mean, there just would have been no time. I mean, you saw it as it happened.
There was no time at all. I saw him swerved around a couple of cars from what I can remember, but it just time just slows right down, and then just smoke coming off both the car's tyres. But it was all a little bit too late. It would have been something like 160 to 200 kilometre an hour impact at point of impact.
Amazing.
He was fair booting it, absolutely booting it, and I saw him get out of the vehicle after the accident. I saw him get out, clutching his arm and his wrist, and walking off to the left-hand shoulder of the motorway. I'm surprised he didn't get hit. But the innocent person in the other vehicle was literally looked dead.
Wow.
They were just still. They were not moving at all. From what I understand, no one has died. But it was just, I was expecting death. It was horrific.
So, Mark, you were driving at the time. Were you going in the opposite direction, or were you going northbound or southbound?
I was heading northbound. Yeah.
Right.
And I saw the guy speeding down the off ramp, and I couldn't. It doesn't compute. It's like, what's going on? And to see this other lady next to me, she was like, what as well?
And then how long did it take for emergency services, for police, for ambulances to arrive on the scene?
I kept driving. I couldn't stop. I was on the motorway, so I couldn't make a call on that. But I rang 111 straight away and asked for everybody. She goes, "Who do you want?" I said, "I just want everybody. Just get them all there."
Yeah.
And then rang a radio station to tell them about the accident and tell them to get it out on air as soon as possible. And then I put a post on Facebook, and I replied to another news agency that put a post up on Facebook as well. And it just really brings home your humanity, your vulnerability to other people's actions and other people's stupidity. Very, very, very scary.
Yeah,
and I'm just so glad that no one died.
Yeah. A good outcome. We'll be finding out more. But thank you very much, Mark. Mark Van Boxel there. He was a witness to that horrific crash that you can go back on our website and have a look at the scenes, probably supplied there by NZTA, but a crazy head-on crash. Southern Motorway today shut down all southbound lanes for 2 hours. In a statement, the police say 4 people were injured in the crash. 2 have moderate injuries. We've got 2 with minor injuries as well. The driver of the stolen car is still in hospital, and police say charges are likely to be laid. It's just coming up to 5:30. And more than $178,000 has been raised to establish Queenstown's first mosque. Muslim residents who have been praying in their own homes or hired out churches or driving hours to get to other mosques want a place to call their own. And they say will also welcome a growing number of Muslim visitors to the city. Katie Dodd has more.
Philip St. Pierre, his wife and 3 daughters are among up to 70 Muslims in Queenstown looking for a place to gather for Friday prayers. They're members of the Queenstown Islamic Centre, which at present doesn't have an address. Sometimes Mr. St. Pierre says they are able to hire a church hall, but there's not always one available.
But of course, proper centre for congregation and to at least ensure people who happen to be in Queenstown can perform their daily prayers, their 5 daily prayers would be the first reason for us to look for such place. Beyond that, of course, it will be to have gathering and to have classes for the Muslim children in terms of religious education.
The number of Muslim tourists arriving in the city is also increasing, and with it, the number of people contacting the Islamic Centre's president, Mohammed Nadeem, asking questions like where they can go to pray.
I get calls nearly every day. Yesterday I had a call and today as well. People calling me and asking me about the places where they can have halal food and as well what time is the prayer.
In May, 3 Muslim Aucklanders visiting Queenstown decided they wanted to help their counterparts and established a crowdfunding campaign on the website LaunchGood. On the website, they cited the Christchurch shootings as a key reason why Queenstown's Muslim community urgently needs a place of its own. People have given generously, with more than $178,000 collected so far. Turkish Kebab of Queenstown manager Abir Hossein is welcoming the fundraising effort and says now is the time to be establishing a mosque.
It's a really good time that people are growing, Queenstown is growing, more people coming to visit. So if it is a place, there will be more connection with people, each other. They can know more and they can get together more,
Philip St. Pierre says the response has been amazing, with donations coming in from all over the world and passing their original goal of $140,000. But he says one big challenge remains, and that's securing a central site in Queenstown's competitive housing market.
There are very few places available, and there is also the element of cost, and of course it has to be so-called zoned. It has to be approved for a place of worship.
He says members will be meeting later this week to discuss their options. Their fundraising page closes at the end of next week. For Checkpoint, Katie Todd.
It's coming up to 27 minutes to 6, and Susanna Leatoa is here for the headlines.
Auckland Councillor Efeso Collins has likened the police response at Ihumātao to a private security firm working for foreign investors. Councillors this afternoon voted unanimously to organise an urgent meeting between interested parties to resolve the dispute over the land in Mangere. Mr Collins said the police response was over the top and doesn't belong in his ward. A woman will appear in the Blenheim District Court on Monday over allegations of sexual misconduct at Marlborough Boys College. The college confirmed in May that a teacher was on leave pending an investigation into a sensitive matter, possibly involving a student. The police today confirmed they have charged a 37-year-old woman with sexual connection with a young person under 16. The Minister for Treaty Settlement says an iwi has suffered significantly as it fought for decades for a fair treaty settlement. Andrew Little was speaking at the final reading of the Ngāti Rangi Treaty Settlement at Parliament this afternoon. It will finalise a $17 million settlement for the iwi, which includes setting up a body to protect the Whangaihu River. The jury in the trial of 3 people over the death of a Ngārua Wahia man last year has been urged to put aside any prejudice towards gang members and drug dealers. Mitchell Patterson died last year after being held in a chokehold in a car, and his body was later thrown off a bridge into the McLaren Falls. A former gang leader, Leon Wilson, and Christopher Smith are charged with kidnapping, manslaughter and conspiring to defeat the course of justice. Leon Wilson's lawyer, Roger Laybourne, told the jury the biggest obstacle to justice for his client is prejudice. Charges are likely after the driver of a car drove the wrong way on Auckland's southern motorway this morning, causing a head-on crash. The police say 4 people were injured in this morning's collision and the driver of the car is in hospital. Before the crash, the police were tracking the car from the air as it was seen driving erratically through the Flatbush area. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks very much, Susanna. And Nona Peltier is here for the business news. How are you?
I'm good. Good evening.
The warehouse is expecting to make a stronger profit.
Yes.
What's all that about?
Well, the warehouse has had a hard time, and we've talked about them over the last few years with, profit earnings that were definitely lackluster and perhaps declining. But look, they've turned things around and they've upgraded their profit guidance. So they're expecting to make about $4 million more than they were forecasting. That's as much as 19% more than the year earlier. And this is in their final week of trading. Their fiscal year ends at the end of July. So, yeah, pretty good news for them.
Were they just worse off last year? I mean, $4 million more doesn't sort of sound huge for the warehouse.
It's still, that's not $4 million more than last year. That's $4 million more than they were forecasting to make, and they were already expecting to do better.
Okay.
Also, they paid down quite a lot of their debt, and that's left them in a much stronger position. So the good news for the warehouse, certainly the shareholders liked it. Their share price rose 5% today at the close. So that was up like 10 cents to $2.21. So, yeah, pretty good. And we also had Sky today. That was an interesting one where they kind of put on a bit of a show to let us know that they're no longer going to be they're getting rid of their app, one of their apps, and they're going to be focusing instead. The app that they had was called FanPass. They just decided they're going to scrap it. And in mid-August, they're going to launch a new one called Sky Now Sport, I believe it is. Let me see. Well,
Lisa starts with Sky. That will help.
It will be something you'll be able to figure it out if you're looking for it. Yeah, that's right. And anyways, they're hoping that it's Sky Sport Now. I put the now in the wrong place. Okay. Sorry, yeah. Anyways, so that's from August 14th. And they're going to offer weekly and monthly and annual subscriptions. And they're expecting that to be a better sort of product, and they're going to be offering things like, commentary, different kinds of replays, that sort of thing. So, yeah, all your sport in one place. We'll see how that goes for them. But the market wasn't that thrilled about it. It was 1.5% down, 2 cents to $1.26. So that was like on the markets. And, we finished up quite strong today to another record close. We were up 0.8%. That's 86 points up, 10,898. It was also very strong in Australia. Over there, they had a record. They were in record territory too.
Wow. Both up against the US dollar?
Yeah, and so against the U.S. dollar, well, the strength of the U.S. dollar has caused Westpac to change its forecast up. It's expecting the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates twice before the end of the year, and could be as low as, according to the Westpac, could be as low as 1% by November. Even lower if unemployment numbers come in higher than expected. We could even see something below 1%, but it will be. We won't know until, I guess, early August when the Reserve Bank updates us. So right now, our Kiwi is trading at 66.95, just under 67 cents US, 96.1 Australian, and 53.7 pence.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Nona Peltier there with the latest in the business world. Coming up to 21 minutes to 6. A year into the problem-plagued overhaul of the capital's bus network, the region's leaders say they still need more time to fix the problems. About 30 bus services are cancelled every day in Wellington, and users still complain of late and inconsistent services. But regional leaders say fixing the problems will take more bus lanes, more drivers, more consultation, more buses and more time. And they say there'll still be good and bad days before those changes make a difference. Michael Crott reports.
The leaders of Wellington's regional and city councils were hauled before Select Committee this morning to explain yet again why the bus network is still not up to scratch. The Regional Council's Chief Executive, Greg Campbell, told MPs he's fully accountable and not shifting the blame to others.
There are issues and we try and point out those issues that then get put forward as blame. They are not blame. Can I say one more time, I'm Chief Executive of this Regional Council and I take accountability. And it's jolly frustrating what's going on and I'm dealing with it. But it is not an easy quick fix.
National MP Nicola Willis pulled the focus on whether the City Council should have done more to anticipate the problems and why it wasn't proactive about working on bus lanes. However, the City Council's Chief Executive, Kevin Lavery, said bus priority had to be parked while routes continued to change and a major transport plan, Let's Get Wellington Moving, was being worked on.
Had we started to implement bus priority changes before those two things were known, we could have been spending a hell of a lot of ratepayer and taxpayer money that would need to be done again. Let me finish. That was a very wise decision.
Both councils are now working together to introduce bus lanes and priority at traffic lights to try to give buses an edge over other traffic. Despite that, the city's Mayor Justin Lester says the lack of bus priority didn't cause the same sorts of problems until the new services started.
But again, I'll point out the fact that the bus priority is an absolute red herring. It will make improvements into the future, but again, from June to July, what was the major change? What was the change in the bus network and the changes made that had an impact on Wellington commuters?
City councillors Diane Calvert and Simon Wolfe also fronted the committee to say bus priority must now take centre stage because confidence in the network is down, with nearly 2/3 of bus users in hard-hit Karori now thinking of taking a car instead.
Bus priority will enable buses to meet their timetables so that people catch a bus, they know they're going to get into work on time, as I said, drop kids off at school, etc.
Building those bus lanes inevitably means removing car parks. The city's public transport infrastructure councillor, Sarah Free, agrees that will be tricky.
We need to be working in partnership to make sure the improvements in service and the provision of buses, the affordable and convenient bus services are there to match the fact that we're taking out car parking and people are going to be more reliant on taking the bus.
It's expected that the first bus priority proposals will be presented to city councillors for a vote after the election in October, with work beginning over summer. Greg Campbell says the biggest challenges for the rollout were trying to develop the new network and run more services without paying more for it.
And so we try to contain that and be a rationalisation of services. Maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe we should have spent more, increased rates and given a much broader service and accepted, maybe for the social good, economic good, that we run some suboptimal services.
Now, as the Regional Council goes back out for more consultation, Mr Campbell says work is needed to get the public on board, which he admits they failed to do last time. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Michael Cropderne.
At 18 minutes to 6, the All Blacks will engage in an experiment this weekend that many pundits would have liked to have seen earlier, with Richie Mo'unga starting at first five and Beauden Barrett at fullback. That's the biggest talking point from the team named today to play the Springboks in Wellington on Saturday night and adds an exciting element to an already big match. Coach Steve Hansen says Mo'unga and Barrett are two of the All Blacks' best backs and he wants them on the field at the same time.
To replace Beauden at first five, you've got to have someone that's pretty good. And Richie's been playing very well for the last couple of years, and at some point you want all your good players to be on the park. Both of them are world-class players, so Saturday's game's the right time to try that particular part of the plan.
Now, Sonny Bill Williams is back in the midfield. That's after overcoming his latest injury. While the forward pack is largely the same as Super Rugby winning Crusaders, Williams has barely played this season, has only managed 37 games of rugby since the 2015 World Cup, an average of less than 10 games a year. However, he's still the selector's first choice in the midfield, and Steve Hansen wants just one thing of Williams this weekend.
Yeah, we've got to see him stay in the park. We know he can play rugby to a high level, so it's his durability at the moment that's been affecting him about getting on the park. So we just want to see him put some minutes together and then assess it from there.
We can go now to RNZ Rugby reporter Joe Porter, who joins us from the Wellington studio. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. What do you make of the move? I suppose it also gives, this is the Mo'unga Barrett move, it gives them a bit more goal-kicking options as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, both have been kicking phenomenally of late, so it'll be hard to I guess, pick between the two this weekend to see who takes the kicks. Cody Taylor joked today they might just take turns. They've been that good lately. But yes, it is an exciting prospect, having Beauden Barrett back at fullback, where he, of course, started his All Blacks career coming off the bench behind Dan Carter at first five. So he was superb in those early days at fullback. He really has a natural game that's probably more suited to fullback, whereas Richie Mo'unga is a more traditional, classical style first five. He's more of a backline general, dictates play, controls play well, in wet conditions, drives the team around, and I guess provides a little bit more stability, whereas Beauden Barrett provides a bit more X factor. So having them both on the field at once seems to be the All Blacks' trump card, I guess, heading into this World Cup, like they would have liked to have done with Damien McKenzie, but he's out obviously for the rest of the season. So yeah, it looks like they want to get Beauden Barrett and Richie Mo'unga on the field at all times.
Yeah, and good to have them with a bit of experience and playing time in case there's sort of a similar scenario to 2011 where first fives were dropping like flies.
That's right. They need Mo'unga to have as much game time, big game match experience under his belt as they possibly can going into the World Cup, because Beauden Barrett's been there and done that. So this is an experiment from the team, and they've got a very senior back three now, and Ben Smith, Beauden Barrett and Rieko Ioane, and it'll be interesting to see how they go. This way may well be the way the team lines up in the World Cup.
Yeah, it certainly looks a stronger one than the one that played the Pumas. But, talking about not having too much game time, Sonny Bill Williams, it does show how valuable he is, though, if Steve Hanson's throwing him in against the Springboks.
Yeah, obviously he is one of Steve Hanson's key components to what he thinks will make up this World Cup squad. He's giving Sonny Bill Williams every opportunity he can to make this team. Look, he hasn't played any rugby this year, barely any rugby at all. The last game he had was 50 minutes for Ponsonby or club rugby about 3 weeks ago, so he's incredibly underdone. But obviously they back his ability, they back his game knowledge, they back his experience and big match capabilities and his ability to turn a match with some of those offloads and unique skill sets that he has. So, look, if Sonny Bill Williams stays fit, he'll play the next 3 games, I imagine, against the Wallabies and the 2 Bledisloe Cup tests as well, and that will secure his spot in the World Cup. However, if he falls over this weekend, I think that might be him.
Right, wow. And just before we go, obviously it's a shorter international season in a World Cup year, so there's a shorter rugby championship. Are we likely to see another kind of change and roll of the dice by Steve Hansen against the Wallabies?
Look, I think you might be right. I think we might see, and it was mentioned today in the press conference, Ardie Savia, the country's best loose forward at the moment in Super Rugby, playing number 8, and Captain Kieran Reid moving to number 6 to blindside. Blindside is an area where the All Blacks are really lacking depth at the moment. Liam Squire is missing with personal issues. It's unclear whether he will even come back in time for the World Cup. He was their first choice last year. Avaya Fafita and Shannon Frizzell. Fafita got to go against Argentina, wasn't great. Frizzell gets to go this weekend against the Springboks, but they're not convinced on either of those 2 players yet. So I think from next week onwards, we may well see Ardie Savia at number 8, Kieran Reid at number 6, with Sam Cane on the blindside. That may well be your top choice loose forward trio going into the World Cup.
Wow, okay, I'll have to wait and see, and it's a good chance for players to show their mettle, that's for sure. Our rugby reporter Joe Porter there joining us and giving us his expertise on the upcoming match at Westpac Stadium Saturday night against the Springboks. It's 13 minutes to 6. I'm Alex Perrottet. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The United States President Donald Trump has declared Robert Mueller's testimony as a big win for the White House. Speaking for the first time on his report into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, Mr. Mueller insisted that his report did not exonerate Donald Trump, as the president has long claimed. He insisted Russia had interfered on Mr. Trump's behalf, but he had not been able to establish collusion in a crime. Here's the BBC's Nick Bryant.
Earlier today, I heard that they were...
The Democrats were hoping these hearings would not just provide the audiobook version of the Mueller report, but a summer blockbuster movie. But the former special counsel didn't even want to appear on Capitol Hill and stuck closely to the script and main findings of his 400-page report.
The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired with the Russian government in its election interference activities.
But the report did not clear President Trump of obstructing justice, of interfering with the Russian meddling investigation.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Mr. Mueller was monosyllabic, but under Republican questioning, stated that although Justice Department guidelines prevent sitting presidents from being prosecuted, it is possible after they leave office.
Could you charge the president with a crime after he left office?
Yes.
You believe that you could charge the president of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office?
Yes.
The White House described the hearings as an epic embarrassment for the Democrats. Donald Trump said to be happy that there was no explosive soundbite from the former special counsel, no moment that went viral.
A phony cloud, that's all it was. And they should be ashamed of themselves. Absolutely ashamed. And you know who knew it was a phony cloud more than anyone else? It was Schiff and Nadler and Schumer and Pelosi, every one of them.
The Democrats may not have got the box office drama they were looking for, but from Robert Mueller, a reminder to Donald Trump that his legal problems haven't necessarily gone away, that his presidential protection from prosecution ends the moment he leaves the White House.
Nick Bryant from Washington at 10 minutes to 6. Police are swarming into the small town of Gillam in northern Canada as they hunt for two teenagers suspected of shooting dead an Australian tourist and his American girlfriend. Cam McLeod, who's 19, and Briar Schmigelski, 18, are suspected of murdering Lucas Fowler and China Deese on a highway in northern British Columbia and being involved in the death of a 64-year-old Vancouver man. Police believe they've now driven more than 3,000 kilometres east to Gillam in Manitoba. Briar Schmigelski's father has told media his son is on a suicide mission and will go out in a blaze of glory. The Deputy Mayor of Gillam, John McDonald, says its 1,200 residents have been told to keep their doors locked.
Earlier today, I heard that they were seen yesterday at the co-op, and I heard that they were seen today down by the rec center. And you know, you have to take into consideration that we're a hydro town. We have a short construction season. We have lots of different contractors and such coming and going out of Gillam. So, you know, it could be very easily somebody could be mistaken for these two that they're looking for. I do know that we have quite a police presence in town. We, the town, asked if the RCMP wanted us to get citizens together to patrol all night for the town, but we were informed by the RCMP sergeant that this was not necessary. They have plenty of manpower, and they don't need that assistance from us. I know most of the businesses were closing earlier this afternoon. This will probably continue like this until the RCMP can assure us that they've left the area or they're caught.
John, what do you think's going on here? I mean, according to reports, these guys have travelled a long way. They've covered some territory, and the vehicle they were most recently seen in has been found burnt out as well. What are people saying or are guessing has happened in terms of how they are getting around?
Well, the speculation is that, to put it bluntly, to take a one-way road into a remote area, you know, there's only one way to drive in and one way to drive out. So, you know, it's very easy to blockade the road. The RCMP have had it blockaded since this all started. Could they have jumped on a train to go north or south? Well, there's that opportunity. I guess they could if you're brave enough to try to jump on a moving train. They definitely wouldn't be able to get on on any of our flights leaving here. So who knows what their thought process was. If they've taken off into the bush, it's to be absolutely honest, it's deadly country. We are nothing but swamp and spruce trees, and we have a very high insect infestation going on right now, we'll call it. The sandflies are out, the black flies are out, the mosquitoes are out. I've been living here for 24 years, and I wouldn't be going into the bush right now unless I had, you know, a couple of cans of insect repellent and a really good bug jacket. It's not the kind of place I'd like to be stuck in overnight.
John, have you seen anything like this in the time you've been in Gillam?
We've had, I don't know how many years ago, a polar bear wandered around Gillam. got people a little bit excited and more cautious. We've had rabid wolves in town in the past. There's been years where we've had lots of black bear sightings, in town. Game wardens have had to trap a bunch and shoot a bunch, over the years. So, we're kind of used to taking precautions and when the word gets around that you need to be a little more cautious, I don't really think that people panic too much over this.
Right, yeah. I mean, one thing's wild animals that it seemed to be a bit out of place. Another thing is two suspected killers on the loose.
That's correct, yeah.
Hey, John, I know you're a bit distant from the police and need to be so, but just to help us and our listeners understand, at one stage these two were suspected to be killed by someone. Now they're suspected killers, and their parents tell a different story. One of the guy's dad is saying, no, my son's fully innocent and he's just got lost. The other parent is saying, well, my son could go out in a blaze of glory. What are police saying in terms of what made them change from seeing these two as potential victims to potential killers?
They never shared that information with us. That's not something that RCMP in Canada would share.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that we would expect to get shared with us. People are just going to have to be cautious and aware of their surroundings, and keep your doors locked even during the day. I know most people in town, if they're in the house and they're just doing daily chores, they don't, as a general rule, lock their doors. But until this is resolved, it's been advised to do so, and I and my wife are doing it at our house, and we'll continue to do so until we get the word from the RCMP that they feel these guys have left the area, and it's no longer a danger. I feel we all feel very badly for the families of the victims as well as the parents of these kids. It's who knows what was going through their minds, if anything.
That's the Deputy Mayor of Gillam, John McDonald. We will bring you any updates we do get. It's about 1 a.m. in Manitoba there in Canada, if we do hear that those two suspects have been apprehended. At 4 minutes to 6, there's news just to hand. An infant in the Canterbury region has been confirmed as having measles. The Canterbury DHB says the infant and their family returned to Christchurch from Auckland, where there's a major outbreak with more than 300 confirmed cases to date. It's thought they contracted the highly infectious disease there in Auckland. The infant had not yet received their first dose of the measles, mumps and rubella, the MMR vaccine, which is given at 15 months. Anyone who was in Christchurch Hospital Emergency Department on Friday the 19th of July, this is between 10 p.m. and 3:45 a.m. the next day, that's between 10 p.m. on the 19th of July and 3:45 a.m. the next day, or on Sunday the 21st of July, this is between 11:40 p.m. and 1:40 a.m. the next morning, that's Monday the 22nd of July. Those people are advised to remain isolated until Monday the 5th of August unless they're sure that they have had 2 MMR vaccinations or if they're over 50 years of age. It's come up to 2.5 minutes to 6. Film buffs around the world are mourning the death of the Dutch actor Rutger Hauer. Hauer was best known as the evil replicant from the 1982 cult classic Blade Runner. He died after a short illness. He was 75. The BBC's Andy Beats has this report.
The role that catapulted Rutger Hauer into Hollywood history, upstaging Harrison Ford as menacing android anti-hero Roy Batty. His speech substantially rewritten by Hauer himself the night before filming.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
His charisma and striking looks helped him win roles in more than 100 movies, often as the villain. Regularly seen on the red carpet, in 1988 winning a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, and more recently appearing in Sin City, Batman Begins, and the HBO fantasy True Blood.
I'm working. Again? Yes. Okay, bye-bye to everybody. Bye.
Filmmakers and actors led tributes on social media, director Guillermo del Toro saying Hauer had brought truth, power and beauty to his films.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Fans too will miss a man who, away from the camera, led a quiet life in the Netherlands, using his money and fame to promote awareness of HIV/AIDS and back the environmental group Greenpeace.
Andy Beats there on the life of Rutger Hauer, and a bit of spooky symmetry between Rutger Hauer and his Blade Runner character Roy Batty. Blade Runner was set in the year 2019. There's plenty more coming up on Checkpoint after the news. We're back to Ihumātao as well as everything else coming up on Checkpoint.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leia Tawa tēnei. An Auckland councillor has likened the police response at Ihumātao to a private security firm working for a group of foreign investors. Councillors discussed the ongoing standoff between protesters and the police next to a historical reserve in Māngere as an extraordinary item at a meeting this afternoon. They voted unanimously in favour of organising an urgent meeting between interested parties as a last-ditch effort to resolve the dispute. Councillor Efeso Collins told the meeting the police response was over the top.
It feels like our overstretched police force are being used as almost a private security firm for a group of foreign investors. This does not have a place in my ward.
Auckland councillor Efeso Collins. The mother of Hinehana Mausi'i says that she's certain her daughter would have lived if she had got the care she needed. The 2-year-old died in 2013 after twice being sent home from Dunedin Hospital's emergency department in the previous 3 days. The child stopped breathing on the afternoon of September the 29th, 2013. The night before she was discharged from Dunedin Hospital less than an hour after arriving and following the assessment of a junior doctor. The child had undiagnosed acute myeloid leukemia. An inquest in the Dunedin District Court this week, her mother, Tracy Alvin, said she had no doubt her daughter would still be alive if she had got the care she needed.
My girl was strong. She had a big heart. I know myself, if they'd have given her what she needed, she would have survived.
Tracy Alvin says she hopes her daughter's legacy will be better healthcare throughout the Southern District. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security has resigned to take up a new position as a High Court judge. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has confirmed Cheryl Gwynn's final day will be next Wednesday. Ms Ardern says Ms Gwynn was instrumental in strengthening the independent oversight of the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service and the Government Communications Security Bureau. She says the IGIS is essential in helping provide the government and public with confidence the agencies are carrying out their activities lawfully and properly. Jacinda Ardern says the process to appoint a new Inspector General will begin shortly. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins is showing no sympathy for principals who say they've been blindsided by part of the teachers' pay deal. The recently signed collective agreement includes a $1,500 payment for union members. The Education Ministry will cover that cost for all ministry-funded teachers, but school boards will have to foot the bill for any extra teachers they've hired using their operational budgets. The Principals Federation says that's unfair, but Mr Hipkins says it's always been the case.
The union should have been well aware of this. This has always been the case. I think if the union either didn't understand or didn't communicate to their members what the flow-on effect of this was going to be, that's really a matter for the union.
Chris Hipkins, the Education Ministry, says roughly 1,800 schools are affected and most will pay no more than $3,000. The high-profile American financier who's facing sex trafficking charges involving underage girls has reportedly been found unconscious in a Manhattan jail cell with injuries to his neck. Some US media say Jeffrey Epstein was found by guards sprawled on the floor of a cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Centre and his face appeared blue. Mr. Epstein was recently denied bail after pleading not guilty to fresh charges which were announced more than a decade after he'd made a plea deal on state prostitution charges in Florida. The billionaire was considered a flight risk. Wellington City councillors say bus services need to be better if they're going to be able to convince the public to give up car parks for bus lanes. The Wellington City and Regional Council says they're working together to introduce bus lanes and priority at traffic lights to try to give buses an edge over other traffic. But building those bus lanes will mean removing car parks. The city's public transport infrastructure councillor, Sarah Free, says convincing the public will be tricky as long as bus services remain inconsistent.
We need to be working in partnership to make sure the improvements in service and the provision of buses, the affordable and convenient bus services, are there to match the fact that we're taking out car parking and people are going to be more reliant on taking the bus.
Sarah Free. The council says work on the first bus priority measures should begin in the summer. It's coming up to 6 Netball New Zealand says it hopes to give Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua a World Cup bonus too. The Silver Ferns will each get $25,000 for their World Cup win, but there's nothing for Taurua at this stage. No prize money came with the world title when New Zealand beat arch-rivals Australia by 1 goal in Liverpool on Monday. But a group of sponsors has contributed to the player payments. Taurua, who's been in the job only 11 months, has been credited with turning the side around following their disastrous Commonwealth Games campaign last year when they failed to win a medal. Netball New Zealand Chief Executive Jenny Wiley says they're working on paying the coaches and team management bonuses too. Playmaker Christian Leali'i Whanno will make a remarkable return to the Wallabies on Saturday, while James O'Connor is also set to make his Test rugby comeback against Argentina in Brisbane. Leali'i Whanno last played for the Wallabies in 2016 and returns following his battle with leukemia. O'Connor, the former bad boy of Australian rugby, played his last Test 6 years ago and is poised to return off the bench. The New Zealand golfer Phyllis Meti has won her third long drive title of the year in New York. The world number one's winning drive was 292 metres. The Bulgarian heavyweight boxer Kubrat Pulev has had his ban for kissing a television reporter lifted after completing a sexual harassment prevention class. Pulev kissed Jennifer Ravalo when she was interviewing him after a fight in California in March. He's been told if he commits a similar act again, his licence will be permanently revoked. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Lien Huang is on the line from Vietnam. Alison Balance finds herself on a lifeboat in Fiordland, and our jazzman Fergus Barrowman has the latest release from Wynton Marsalis, his reimagining of the music of jazz pioneer, the legendary Buddy Bolden. That's Nights with me, Brian Crump. Afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, mainly fine. Rain in the far north tonight and tomorrow. Possible thunderstorms with a few showers elsewhere tomorrow. For Auckland, Waikato and Gisborne, a few showers. Coromandel Peninsula and Western Bay of Plenty. Periods of rain with some heavy falls. Waitomo to Manawatu, including the remainder of Bay of Plenty, Central High Country, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Mainly fine weather, isolated afternoon showers tomorrow. For Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast through to Wellington, fine weather. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine. Areas of low cloud or fog in the morning and persistent about some valleys. Westland, mainly fine, becoming cloudy tomorrow evening. Southland, fine apart from high cloud. Fiordland, cloudy periods, rain developing in the west this evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, the odd shower tonight. You're with RNZ National. Indira Stewart is back at 5 a.m. with First Up, followed by Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan on Morning Report at 6. It's now coming up to 6:08.
Thanks very much, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Alex Perrottet. Thanks for joining us. It's day 3 of the standoff at Ihumātao and there's no sign of a resolution. and some Auckland councillors now say they regret signing off on allowing a major housing development bordering land considered sacred to iwi. They've voted unanimously to organise an urgent meeting between interested parties as a last-ditch effort to resolve the dispute. Several hundred demonstrators and dozens of police officers are still at the site, although elders from local Mana Whenua Te Kawaroa Maki say most of the protesters aren't from their tribe and don't know the history of the land. Well, our reporter Tom Furley is there and can bring us the very latest. What's happening at the moment, Tom?
Yeah, g'day, Alex. Yeah, well, things are just sort of starting to settle into the night. So in the last sort of 20 minutes or so, people have been setting up fires along what's been labelled the front line, that standoff area between people and the police. I'm standing on the field at the moment, and last night there was a lot of open space. The police were about 500 metres from the road, and early this morning they pushed that line up to within about 100 metres of the road. And this is where all the tents and things have been set up, and that's where they're sort of most are sort of in a position facing off against the police rather than the road junction that has been over the last couple of nights. But in the last 20 minutes or so, a lot of fires have been set up, keeping people warm as it gets cold. And, you know, I mean, it's the third night, and particularly, I guess, among a lot of the Mana Whenua, there's starting to be a bit of tiredness creep in, a bit of fatigue from some long nights. But there seems to be people still arriving. There's still people walking up the road with blankets and their bedding and warm clothes and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's still sort of it's peaceful. There's people who are on the front lines having a chat to the police. The police line has thinned out a lot more than it was on Tuesday night. They were standing shoulder to shoulder. Tonight there's sort of 5 metres in between them. But yeah, a bit of fatigue setting in, I think.
Yes, we've heard all throughout the day that it's certainly been more peaceful than it has been the last couple of days, that tensions died down. In fact, we've just heard from the police. They've sent us a statement saying they're pretty happy with the way that the demonstrators, the protesters, the protectors, whatever you might call them, have been behaving. But you're saying more and more people are turning up. Is there any sign that the police might be a bit apprehensive about the new crowds coming along to support?
There hasn't been any sign of that. I was having a chat to a woman earlier. Her and her family had come up from Cambridge, and she was sort of having a good old chat. Shook the officer's hand as he was sort of swapped out, as his shift was swapped out. So I'm not really picking up that vibe, but I think there has been through the communication of this action that very much from Mana Whenua is wanting to have a peaceful protest, and from what I've seen, people are pretty understanding of that, and that's the spirit in which they've come here.
Hey, thanks very much. Tom Furley there. He's been there each evening this week reporting from Ihumātao there in Mangere in Auckland and bring us the very latest. More and more people turning up, but certainly the mood is fairly peaceful, and police sound like they're very happy with the way people are conducting themselves throughout the dispute. The Prime Minister, though, isn't budging on the Ihumātao standoff, repeatedly telling media today that it's one for the developer and Mana Whenua to resolve between themselves. Jacinda Ardern was in Ohaupo near Hamilton today, where she was asked about the government's ability to intervene.
This is something, of course, where there is huge strength of feeling, but on both sides. But ultimately, this is an issue for Mana Whenua rather than an issue for the Crown. And really, there are different views from within Mana Whenua on the issue as well.
That's the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern on her and her government's stance on Ihumātao and that dispute at 12.5 minutes past 6. Principals are crying foul after being told schools will have to stump up for the bill for some teachers' one-off bonuses that were secured in the recently agreed pay deal. But the government is not budging. The Education Minister says the unions knew what they signed up for. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The teachers' pay dispute has been messy. Months of deadlock, mass strikes, and then, even after breakthrough, more delays in actually getting the pay rises into teachers' pockets. Now, another quarrel. The Principals Federation, led by Whetu Cormack, is upset.
It comes as a complete surprise, and I just think it's unfair.
As part of the teachers' pay deal, every union member will receive a one-off $1,500 payment. But a conflict's now brewing over who exactly foots that bill. The Education Ministry funds schools for a certain number of teachers and will pay those teachers the lump sum. But school boards can also hire extra staff using their operational budgets on the condition they're responsible for all associated costs. And that means they'll have to stump up that $1,500 for those staff.
One would have thought that the ministry were giving this to teachers that they were going to front the bill. But to hear that some schools will have to pay it from the operations grant is unhelpful, and for many schools it will be an extra financial burden, one that wasn't budgeted for.
And Liam Rutherford from the Primary Teachers Union, the Educational Institute, agrees it's not fair.
The $1,500 is what the government and the ministry have agreed to. They should be the ones that are wearing that costs and not schools.
But the government's not budging. The Education Ministry says nothing's changed. It's always been the case that schools pay the extra costs for their extra teachers. And the Minister, Chris Hipkins, isn't at all sympathetic.
The union should have been well aware of this. This has always been the case. I think if the union either didn't understand or didn't communicate to their members what the flow-on effect of this was going to be, that's really a matter for the union.
And the Minister has found some support from the other union that was in the room, the secondary teachers, the PPTA. Called for comment, its Vice President, Melanie Webber, had this to say.
Principals have always known that they need to comply with all the conditions that are offered in the collective. When you hire additional teachers, you are responsible for providing their conditions, so it shouldn't be a surprise.
And yet it seemed to be a surprise for some. The Principals Federation is still hopeful the government will relent, but the Minister and Ministry are showing no sign of that. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
And the Ministry of Education, just to follow up on that, it says roughly 1,800 schools will be affected. In a statement that it sent us, it says the vast majority will pay no more than $3,000. That's 0.5% of their annual operating funding. Just coming up to 15 and a half minutes past 6. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. A storm that struck Nelson, Tasman 18 months ago has become the benchmark by which councils are projecting sea level rise in the region. Tasman's Mayor Rutger Hauer is now asking people to stay calm if they receive a letter indicating their property may be at risk from sea level rise and storm tides. He says it's the first step in the conversation about what lies ahead and how it might be managed. Our Nelson reporter Tracy Neal visited residents in some of the most vulnerable locations and asked them if they're worried.
The confluence of a king tide and a storm surge generated by Cyclone Fahey damaged homes, roads and property right around the edge of Tasman Bay and into Golden Bay. Robert Anderson lives on the water's edge in Motorway and had to leave when the sea went through his two-storey home.
The tide just poured over the bank here, down there, and it was waist deep further down there of seawater. That's why all these trees have died. It was all underwater here, right across the paddock.
He says the warning signs appeared when he and his late wife Joy began building their home in the mid-1980s.
We're living in a caravan, and Joy that night said, "We've got to move the house." I said, "Why?" She said, "The sea's coming under the house," and it was running under the house, a pillar down the road. So that's 1987.
The sea level around New Zealand has risen at an average annual rate of 1.8 millimetres over the last century. The Ministry for the Environment says it could rise a further metre by 2100. Councils around the country are already taking steps to mitigate the effects, from increasing the height of building foundations to talks around relocating towns. In Tasman, some will soon know if their property may be at risk, even if it's not directly connected to the coast. Mayor Richard Kempthorne knows people will be concerned.
This is the start of a process. We've now got NIWA information and Ministry for the Environment guidance, which we need to take account of. So we must have this conversation with our community, and as we go forward, we'll be working out what are the measures that can be taken.
Bob Haswell lives on the cliffs above Tasman's Ruby Bay, away from any possible sea level rise, but not immune to the effects of erosion from recent severe weather. He reckons the council's planning approach is misguided.
What I think they're trying to say is we're going to get extremes of cyclones that are going to pump water into coastal properties. So how do you plan for that?
Mr Haswell prefers to blame recent events on weather extremes as opposed to climate change, a term he's already tired of. But Richard Kempthorne says the current action is modelled on predictions.
Some of the properties may not be affected and some may, and exactly when is anybody's guess. But what we're looking at is, with the information that we've been given, looking long term, these are the properties and issues that we need to be making people aware of.
That's about where the water is. That's the tide comes into there.
Should we walk down there?
Yeah, it's not far.
Russell and Rose Scott live down a quiet country lane not far from Robert Anderson on the edge of the Motorway estuary. They enjoy riding their horses along the beach, which is part of a dynamic sandspit.
We're riding 30 metres inland from where we were 10 years ago. At least 30, some places more. And then in 2016, the sandbar, the water rushed right across and put a wee channel in there, and that's quite deep now.
Mr Scott says the changes are happening before their eyes, and he's not sure there's a lot anyone can do. Local government New Zealand has already said that while some councils see it as inevitable they'll have to take some responsibility, it's not their role to protect private property from erosion. Bob Haswell doesn't want to think about what it could cost the ratepayer.
What are we going to spend? TDC, $1 billion to rectify or raise the coastal plateaus and bring, truckloads of soil down from great mountains and raise that whole coastal zone and protect it. I don't think so. We can't afford to do things like that.
Russell Scott reckons halting sea level rise is about as easy as harnessing the moon.
No, that's too big a job. It's huge. I wouldn't want to be on council coming up with ideas to try and protect it. You can have a lot of money and put a lot of rocks in place, which holds it for a wee while.
In the meantime, the Scots would like the council to fix the blocked roadside culvert outside their place, which has already flooded the neighbour's property.
And they put the wrong size culvert in, but it's not coping and it's probably blocked in there somewhere, and so it's just not getting away, and the water's sat there for 3 days now, and I don't think the neighbour's home to come home and see all these fijoas underwater.
Residents are hoping that those fijoas are the only things succumbing to rising water levels. In Tasman for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
At 21 minutes past 6, there's good news for the Silver Ferns. They will get a payout following their Netball World Cup victory after all. No prize money came with the title when New Zealand beat arch rivals Australia by just 1 point in Liverpool on Monday. But Sky Television and team sponsors ANZ, Puma and MYOB have all chipped in with a payout that will see each of the 12-strong squad get $25,000 each. Netball New Zealand Chief Executive Jenny Wiley told sports editor Stephen Hewson she's pleased they can reward the players for winning the trophy for the first time in 16 years, and she hopes they will also be able to pay the coaches and team management bonuses as well.
Suite of really amazing partners have gotten their heads together and been able to work through what we can do to recognise the players, and I think it's Sky, ANZ, MYOB and Puma have been amazing, and that's where we've been able to land and be able to sort of put something back towards the players and all they've achieved.
So is that prompted by Netball New Zealand?
Well, no, I think it was a sort of a joint effort. They certainly wanted to do something to recognise the team, and we were also looking for how do we sort of acknowledge everything that they've done.
And does that include the coaches or just the players?
We are absolutely looking to do something for the coaches and management. It's just a matter of working through that next step of what it might look like for them as well. So they will be recognised too.
So how many players get the 25,000?
Well, the team squad that went up to the UK will all receive something. There's 12 of them that go up.
How difficult is it then saying to them there was no prize money come that World Cup win? I mean, presumably that must be something that plays on your mind?
Oh, look, I mean, it would have been great to be able to have all this sort of filed away and ready to go in advance, but Netball New Zealand has invested everything that we've got in this campaign, just getting them there. And I think it's really evident from talking with the players, they don't do it for the money. They are there for the love of the game and the ability to represent their country, and I think it's a really humble position for them to take. And so to be able to recognise that in this way, to this magnitude, is absolutely amazing.
I was thinking more with international netball, because obviously they run the tournament, so and the rights around TV rights, broadcast rights, the fact that they haven't been able to get their act together to get a prize pool when every other World Cup does.
Well, I think it's something that we as a whole all need to work on. Every country pays their own way to get to the Netball World Cup. It hasn't reached a point in its maturity where there's enough money for the international body to fund teams to get there, let alone put prize money on the table. But I really do hope that they now can see the benefit and value from it, and in this changing climate of recognising women's sport, that they can now leverage this to be able to change the game in that sense.
Netball New Zealand Chief Executive Jenny Wiley talking to our sports editor Stephen Hewson. And staying with a story on cash, if you're having a bad day at work, spare a thought for Media Goodwin. The owner of Hokianga Takeaways and Rawene was heading to the bank in Kaikohe when a big gust of wind ripped her hard-earned cash out of her hands. Media watched on in horror as a flurry of notes, all $800 of it, went flying down the main street. She told me how the routine banking trip went so terribly wrong.
So I just pulled up outside the bank on just a beautiful day in Kaikohe, and I must have just grabbed the bag upside down, and it was, of course, the one day that I didn't have a paper clip, and, you know, everything kind of went wrong all at once. And there was obviously a big gust of wind, and about $800 and 5s and 10s and 20s just went flying down the street. And so I, ran after some and, spent a little bit of time trying to gather it up, and then I just saw all these people kind of jump out of cars and start picking it up, and I kind of was just like, oh no, worst nightmare kind of thing coming through, and I was just like,
you're going to run away with it. You thought that's the end of your cash.
Yeah, pretty much. And then so I kind of just went, okay, I'll probably just have to take one for the team here, and kind of just started walking back to my car with whatever, $50 or something, which I managed to scrape up. And then, these 3 people, older lady and a young fella, and then a little girl came up behind me, all with massive handfuls of money, and gave it to me, and I was kind of holding it like big scrunched up pile of money, and ended up getting into the bank, and I was just like, oh, it would have been hilarious to watch on camera, but I got to the teller and had my check with said $800, and it was just nerve-wracking watching the lady count the money, and she was doing it out loud, so we were going, oh, and then we got there and we were $10 over. I think it was just a miscalculation, I hope. I hope that, one of the people that were helping me didn't feel bad or anything and chip in or something, because it's pretty unbelievable that I got everything back. But
maybe they found a rogue $10 note on the street.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it was my unlucky day.
Well, and what led you to suspect that they were all going to run away with it? Were you a bit suspicious of the people of Kaikohe, were you?
No, it wasn't that. It was just, I can understand it. Like if a whole bunch of money was to just fly down the road, like it was just so fast. This was all in about 20 seconds. There was no way that I was going to get it. And I thought it would just be the biggest job ever. And I was worried about the traffic, because all the traffic was congested up while people were running all over the road. And it was all very fast. So I just kind of, because I was just so flustered and embarrassed and, I was just panicking, I just thought it was all over. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm just going to have to reinvest my business for this. And,
Media, tell us, put it in context. It's $800, but I mean, is it a restaurant that you run?
I run a takeaway shop in Rawene.
And so tell us, in a sense, how much work it takes, how long it would have taken to earn that.
get much, but it's still a lot of money. It's still a big bill for us, or we're just a small business, so every dollar counts, and I'm sure most small business owners would, agree.
Hey, you said you're in a bit of a fluster, of course, people running up to you, including a little girl handing you the cash, which would have been very sweet.
Yeah.
And then you head into the bank, and then you wanted to track them down to say thank you. So how did you find them?
Okay, so I ended up, just because I know that I feel like Kaikohe has quite a bad reputation, just because it's by a big correction facility, and, there's some gang members living there, and, all sorts of trouble happens there every now and then, just like everywhere in New Zealand. But I feel like Kaikohe gets a pretty bad rep, and not only did I just want to, let people know, kind of hopefully, restore people's faith in the area, or, just be like, hey, there's good people everywhere, so don't be judgmental or, have a different approach about things. But I was in such a fluster and a rush, I kind of just only had the opportunity to just, get the money off the people and just say, thank you so much, oh my gosh. And, I didn't want to drop more money on the street. And so I just went into the bank. So I just really wanted to put something on Facebook. I know there's a couple of local pages around for, kind of like buy, sell pages and community pages for the area. So I thought maybe someone that I might know could be able to share it on a page for me, and they did. And I found one of the ladies, but I'm still looking for the young guy and the little girl or her family or someone.
Miria Goodwin there, and the very trustworthy and good people of Kaikohe. A great way to finish the program. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, we are back tomorrow. Ka kite a pōpō.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. An Auckland councillor says the police response to the protest over a housing development at Ihumātao has been over the top. The police say they've made no arrests today and will remain at the site near Auckland Airport overnight. A 37-year-old woman has been arrested over allegations of sexual misconduct at Marlborough Boys College. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, Cheryl Gwynn, has resigned to take up a new position as a High Court judge. And a witness to a head-on collision that closed Auckland's southern motorway for 2 hours this morning says both cars disintegrated when they hit each other. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7 o'clock.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Boris is a divisive figure. He's described sometimes as Marmite, which, if you know the English spread, is something that people either love or they hate.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late-night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
So we have had journalists as Prime Ministers. Julius Vogel